Hey there, welcome back to Coding with Drew. In this video, we will learn about JavaScript functions. There's a lot of ways to declare a function, and it's the reason I taught you Bash first, so hold on to your butts. This one gets bumpy. To create a function, you give it a name, and then you write the statements needed to achieve its task inside the curly brackets. This is known as a function declaration. We are looking at traditional function declaration. More on that in a second. This function is pretty basic. It contains only one expression, hello plus name. The point to remember is that functions store code required to perform a specific task, and that the script can ask the function to perform that task whenever it is needed. The benefit to functions, if you haven't gathered that from Bash, is that it helps us to keep our code clean, dry, or don't repeat yourself. If different parts of a script need to perform the same task, you don't need to repeat the same expression multiple times. Just declare a function and call it. Having declared a function, you can execute all of the statements between its curly brackets with just one line of code. This is known as initializing the function or calling the function. In this example, our sayHello function has a parameter called name. We have to pass an argument inside of our parentheses that will be used in place of the parameter name. In this case, let's use Drew. Say hello, Drew. The output of the function then becomes hello, Drew. All right, let's take a deeper look into traditional function declaration. JavaScript allows for functions to be assigned as the value of a variable, where Bash does not. This is an important distinction and has some interesting implications for creative problem solving. Here's an example. Let Mrs. equals function, prefix, and we're going to pass a parameter called last name. And the expression or statement that it's going to perform is return Mrs., and it's going to expand the parameter last name. So to call this, we would have to say Mrs., parentheses, and a last name. So Mrs. Carricker, for example. Anonymous functions are very similar to traditional functions, but they're not named. While this isn't valid JavaScript because it cannot be called, there are ways to call it, called function expressions. You can also use it in a callback, but we'll talk about those later. This is a valid way to use an anonymous function. It's called a function expression. It'll allow you to reuse the function and leverage hoisting, another topic we'll cover shortly, but what you need to know now is that hoisting is how JavaScript moves functions to the top of the file so it can be run before it is defined. Arrow functions can seem intimidating, but these are functions that are shorthanded. If you only have one parameter like last name, you don't need to use parentheses as shown above, but would be necessary in a traditional function with more than one parameter you're passing. You may be asking, will I use these or anonymous functions? And the answer is yes, most likely. At the very least, you'll work with other people's code that leverages a combination of all the above. So it's important to know. Let's put our hands on the keyboard and try to convert a traditional function into an arrow function. So let's open up google.com and open up our console. I'm going to inspect and go to console. Make this a little bit bigger. And all right, so let's create a function. We're going to call it area, and it's going to have two parameters, length and width, and it's going to multiply length times width to return a total. So let's see it in action. Let area equal function and curly brackets, semicolon. All right, inside of this, we're going to call this function dimensions. So this is a traditional function, and it's going to have length and width parameters. So inside of our curly brackets, I press Shift Enter to make that go to a new line without executing my code. I'm going to pass const total equals length times width. Return total. This could actually be done in one line, and I'd like for you to see it all long form first. The return keyword is something we haven't talked about, and I'd like to do that now. Return says whatever the output of this function, execute this and exit. So it will go to the next line of code. Anything that follows this, for example, would not execute. This should be the last line of any function. Okay, so we have this function. Let's make this a little bit cleaner. We can simplify this, like I was saying, by removing this line altogether. And we can just return length times width. Return. Okay, so we've simplified it somewhat. Oh, it does not like the semicolon there. Let's fix that. Okay. So let's take area and execute it. So area, remember, if we want to initialize or call a function, we put parenthesis after it. Now I'm going to try to run it as is. And you can see I get not a number. Well, let's pass 3, 4. And you can see the result is now 12, because what it did was it took 3 as the length. It passed the length here, and then it took the width here, and it passed it here, and it multiplied them together, and it equals 12. Okay, let's convert this function to an anonymous function. So the way we do that is really simple. All right, we're going to delete function dimension. We're going to delete our curly brackets, and we're going to delete our return statement because it's not necessary. We're going to add an arrow and delete this closing parentheses. Okay, so what we've just done was turn 4 lines of code into 1. And we can press return, and we can still run area 3 times 4, and it will result in 12. If you have any questions, reach out in Slack. The #questions channel is a great resource. The community will help. I will help. And I also have teachers assistants, which will reach out to you and try to assist you in any way that they can. All right. So arrow functions, we just kind of went over. They can seem intimidating, but they're basically just anonymous functions that are shorthanded. You may be asking, will I use these or anonymous functions? And the answer is yes, most likely. The last kind of function declaration you should be aware of is called an immediately invoked function expression. What you need to know is it's any function that's wrapped with parentheses and then immediately called by another set of parentheses. As you can see in the example above, we call this entire function immediately upon execution. And we pass it the parameter, or we pass it the argument character. So the result would be Mrs. Character. This means the function is executed as it's read. That's it for this video. I look forward to seeing you in the next section.